Some know him as Wojo. Some know him as Park City's own version of Ted Lasso. I know him as the head coach of the Salt Lake City Stars. He is Steve Wojciechowski on Roundball Roundup on UtahJazz.com. So good of you to join us in the studio.
Thanks for having me.
So does this put the coaching Park City Ted Lasso situation on hold, the start of this?
It does. It does, especially the football part of Ted Lasso. I think I'll still be in the gym with my kids, rebounding for them as they are, pursuing their basketball journeys. But it's a full-time job, and I'm looking forward to it.
It was the most emotional part of the press conference, you talking about your kids, coaching them. What was so gratifying about having that time with them to be able to coach them from day to day?
It's one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Like when you're in college coaching and really any type of professional coaching, it requires time away. And I had the gift of time, and I chose to spend that time with my kids and in the game. And not necessarily because I want them to be great players, but if I reflect on my life, some of the best lessons that I've ever learned happened to me through the game of basketball. And so to be able to share that with my kids and their friends was really as much fun as I've ever had in coaching. And I've loved my coaching career. In fact, I am running a camp right now in Park City, and I had a bunch of the kids I coach in the camp, and I mentioned to them because we talk about being a willing listener and learner in camp, because I think it's a skill that anybody who excels in any area of their life has, the ability to learn and the desire to learn, the hunger to learn. And one of the things I learned from coaching my kids and being able to see the game of basketball through their eyes was the joy of the game. And that's why I initially started playing basketball. I don't come from a basketball family. Everybody assumes that my dad was a coach or I come from a basketball family. And that couldn't be further from the truth. My dad's a longshoreman. He worked a hard job on the docks of Baltimore. But I fell in love with the game very early. And I found great joy in playing it. And then later I found great joy in coaching it. But I lost that somewhere along the way when I was coaching in college. The business side of it at times can rob you of that, where you're always focused on kind of the business of basketball. And you forget, like, the foundational piece of it is the love of the game and sharing the love of the actual game of basketball, but also sharing the love of what basketball can teach you. And so I got to see that again. I got reminded of it by coaching my kids. And it felt amazing. And so that's a lesson. That's what I learned. Because we all should never stop learning. But that's what I learned from coaching them. And that's as valuable as drawing up a great X's and O's play, because that's the foundational piece.
And I'm sure, not only learning about your kids, but even learning rules of these young leagues, what the youth sports is all about, learning about football, because I don't think that you were a football coach before.
No, I didn't play football.
Yeah.
I actually played soccer all growing up. So, it was humbling. When you're talking about coaching, football. Like I was literally the Park City version of Ted Lasso. In fact, that's what like people would say, because I focused more on the values that create good players and good teams, and those values are the things that I could help with. I couldn't help with all the stuff involved with coaching football and plays, and I didn't even know the positions half the time. However, that wasn't my role. My role was to say, like, look, we just lost a game. We feel bad. Okay, what are we going to do with it? What is our response going to be? Because for these kids, there's going to be things that happen throughout their life that aren't ideal. And you have some control, but when it's over, you have none. What you have control over is your response. And so those were the types of lessons that I provided. Now, I didn't put a believe sign
In the locker
you know,
room.
in the locker room, but you know, that was my role, and I think the kids had a great experience, and I certainly know I did.
It worked for Coach Beard and Coach Lasso. It worked for you.
Yeah, that's right.
Looking at the background, people know you from your time at Duke. Where did the love of the game, where did you get on their radar? How did you occur that Duke would be a school that would be interested in you?
Well, really, I mean, even through my first 3 years of high school, you know, I developed into someone that could play Division I basketball. But really, after my junior year in high school, I was probably either going to go to Penn or Princeton. At that time, it was Pete Carroll at Princeton and Fran Dunphy at Penn, and which would have been incredible because those guys are great coaches, and obviously those schools speak for themselves in terms of the quality of education and experience. And then I went to a camp after completing my junior year. It was called the 5-Star Basketball Camp. Back in those days,
Garf.
5-Star, yeah, Garf was a close friend. I mean, I left a lot of cartilage on the outdoor courts at the 5-Star Basketball Camp. But I ended up getting MVP, and there were other really good players. Stephon Marbury, who was a great NBA player. Vince Carter, who was a terrific NBA player. I went to the camp, and I ended up getting MVP. Garf called a guy named Sonny Vaccaro and said, you know, we just had this kid from Baltimore win MVP of our camp. You should invite him to your camp. And his camp was the ABCD camp. It was an all-American camp. And it was the year in between him leaving Nike and him going to Adidas. So we were sponsored by Converse, the Grandmama React Juices. I got invited to that camp and as a late invitation. So I flew up to Ypsilanti, Michigan. It was the first time I've ever been on a plane. And flew up to Eastern Michigan and started the ABCD camp. They were doing roll, and my name's not being called, which is not unusual when your last name's Wojciechowski. You usually last in line. And then when your name comes up, whoever's calling roll is fearful for butchering the name. So I'm like, okay, this is par for the course. I'm used to this since elementary school. My name wasn't called for roll. And so, again, I was super late in invite. So I went up to Sonny and I said, hi, my name's Steve Wojciechowski. I know Howard Garfinkel contacted you about this camp. I don't have a team to play on yet, but I'd really love to be a part of this team. And Sonny, in Sonny's way, he's like, yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. So I end up being on a team with 8 Eastern Europeans who spoke no English and showered less than that. And so I'm on this team with like one other American-born player,
Okay.
and we go on to have a great camp. And I had a great camp, but initially I'm thinking, what is this?
That's a challenge.
Yeah.
Your teammates don't speak English.
Yeah, but I was able to connect with them pretty quickly, and it actually, in hindsight, and I didn't recognize this at the time, it was the best thing for me because they played away and they needed what I did the best. They needed direction, they needed leadership, they needed somebody to organize and to unify. And I was able to do that in the camp. If I would have ended up on Team New York City and the way I shined was to score playing one-on-one and, you know, like doing that stuff, I would not have looked as good. I guarantee it. But I was able to play well, and at the end of that camp, I was one of the better players in camp. And I went from a guy who was going to decide between Penn and Princeton to Duke, North Carolina, and all the blue bloods. So this is like a 6-week span.
Wow.
And my life changed in 6 weeks. And then obviously from that, I ended up at Duke at the end of the recruiting process, and the rest is history, as they say.
But that's how impactful those camps were. 5-star I just remember the orange shirts
Yeah.
from 5 Star. ABCD was such a big deal during that time. Sonny Vaccaro of Air fame
Yeah,
now
yeah,
that people
sure.
know because he's Matt Damon. But they were really important to the entire recruiting circuit. The best coaches were going to those camps.
Yeah, and that was like before AAU became so big. So like that was those, 5 Star was a great teaching and learning camp. ABCD was kind of one of ABCD and Nike my senior year were like the two camps where you had probably the best 200 or 200 of the best high school players invited. So it was a big deal. And it's like sometimes you don't believe things are happening. But a funny story is like because my last name's Wojciechowski, which looks like an Eastern European name, and it's Polish. When people would call my parents in Baltimore, they'd speak real slow, like "hello,"
Because
they
they
expected me to be Eastern European, and which they speak good Baltimore English, so.
The O's,
The
right?
O's and Hun
The
and all that kind
Baltimore
of stuff.
accent, yeah, definitely. Looking at what happened after going to Duke and then eventually becoming an assistant coach, what has been the influence of only one of the best college basketball coaches of all time in Coach K? How has he influenced the way that you've gone about your basketball career and how things have occurred to you in this basketball life?
Yeah, I think Coach K is the greatest teacher I've ever had, and the vehicle that he used to teach was basketball. And so many of the things that he did for myself and my teammates in terms of building relationships, pushing us to be our best selves, being there when we tried to be our best selves, but we weren't, those are all lessons that really I take from daily. I mean, there's not a day that goes by where I don't draw upon something that I learned from him as a player and then working for him for a long time. And so, like when you talk about the people that have had the most impact on my life outside of my family, my mother and father and my brother and sister, Coach K has had as big as impact on me as anyone.
What was that experience to see him coach the Redeem team after USA Basketball had gone through a situation in Athens where they don't bring back the gold? You go and see him actually accomplish it with pros, with players that are of a really high level of caliber.
I think when people think of Coach K, they think of West Point and like my way or the highway, and this is the way we're going to do things, and there's no deviation because this has served me so well in college, and that's not really what he did at all. Number one, he tried to learn about the international game and professional players, first and foremost. And then number two, he tried to learn, ways for him to connect with the best players in the world so they could be themselves on the international stage. He's incredible about setting an environment where people feel like the environment is invested in them and they invest in the environment. And he was doing it not with the best college players, he's doing it with some of the best players to ever live, LeBron, Kobe, D. Wade, Melo, all those guys. And it didn't take long for, I think, those guys to recognize that he was going to be a partner in this pursuit. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't about him. It was about the name on the front of the jersey. And it was magical. And then for me to be a part of that with the role that I had, supporting Coach K and supporting USA Basketball, to see it firsthand grow and build was incredible. People talk about culture all the time. You had the best players in the world who had an amazing connection to the mission of representing the United States and putting USA Basketball back on the top of the mountain. and to see all the things that went into it, and then being a very small part of it, I don't want to oversell it, was, really, one of the most joyful experiences I've had in coaching.
Was there a pinch me moment during that experience for you?
There were many. I mean, I came back to the States with welts because I pinched myself so much. Just like, for me, having Kobe Bryant say, will you, I need you to come back to the gym and rebound for me and work me out. I'm like, how about I rebound for you? You do what you do. That, and then seeing these guys, the best of the best, really connect to our country. Because I think the perception is, these guys, it's hard for people these guys are human beings, but because they are so gifted and they've maximized their gift, you sometimes lose sight of that. And to see them really connect to a bigger mission. Because sometimes you think, they're only connected to their own individual mission. That wasn't the case, at least in USA basketball. And, that was thrilling. They're human beings too, extraordinary ones. But you got to see the human side of what they do, in addition to the best practices of the best players.
And Carlos, I talked to him before about how great Coach K is as a motivator, bringing in soldiers for that experience to speak to the team. He said was something that rallied the team around the cause and helped them get the gold in the end.
Yeah, I mean, Coach is great at communication, and Coach is great at trying to dig to a deeper level, not just going surface. Where his play was going to win the gold medal. It was going to be guys connecting to a bigger mission. And if they did that, it didn't matter what plays you ran, because those guys were so good. And so that's where the focus of USA basketball for Coach K was, one, a standard of behavior. Like, there were standards and expectations of how the players and the staff were going to represent themselves, and how we were going to represent the country. And the players that was clear to the players, and they were held to that standard. And then the second thing was it was bigger than the X and O strategy. I mean, obviously that's always an important part of basketball, because you want to, if guys have that belief, you want to put them in the best positions to succeed. But it was more about you guys are wearing the jersey, and you're, in your mid-20s, here's a soldier, and as he walks in the room, he's got one leg and he can't see. Because when he was 25, he was fighting for our country. And, those things are meaningful. Like, you have to be heartless not to feel that.
Right.
And so that was always reinforced, with our team. And then you could tell how much it meant to him, because when the team, in fact, did win the gold, it wasn't like, we're the best players, we were supposed to do that. It was like, we just made a huge investment with people that we really respect and have grown to care deeply about. And look what we did. So it was, being a part of 2008 in Beijing and 2012 in London were a real thrill on a lot of levels.
Going about building your own program now that you're the head coach of the Salt Lake City Stars, what made this the right opportunity? How are you approaching the job?
Well, number one, I miss coaching at the highest level. And this will be the highest level I've coached at. Like I said in the press conference, when you think of the G League as a basketball league from a talent perspective, it's, outside of the NBA, and then some people may argue EuroLeague, but I think you could make a strong argument outside the NBA, it's the next best league in the world. And so to coach players that have the ability to compete at this level, but also have aspirations of continuing their journey to the highest level, is really exciting. And the thing that I miss most about one of the things I miss most about coaching is the development piece. And so, as good a league as it is, it's not necessarily the final destination for most of the people in the league, both players and staff. So I'm looking forward to, and I love the fact that that's the primary mission of the league. I mean, the G League, I'm old enough to remember when it was called the D League for development.
Yep.
It's the mission of the league, and I like helping people grow and develop, not just as basketball players, but also as people. Because everyone in the league, while really talented and high achievers, there's something that's not quite there yet. And it could be a skill on the floor. It could be a skill off the floor. And I want to work with these guys to figure out what it is so that they get what they want from this experience. I've been in, like coaching for over 20 years, and most other top leagues, it's like, are you winning or are you losing? Mm-hmm. And they can flower it up any way they want, but at the end of the day, like, you win, good, you lose, bad. And I want to win a lot, but that's not as important to me as helping the people in the organization grow individually. And the best way to grow individually is to connect yourself to a group. So the more the group grows collectively, the more the individual can shine. Like those two things, to me, go hand in hand.
The new CBA, for the new CBA heads, there's going to be a two-way spot available to teams. You're going to be dealing a lot with these two-way players. How do you go about seeing guys go up and down between the Jazz and the Stars in the way that happens?
Well, that's just part of it. I think one of the things you have to do is be really flexible, because that's our role. Our role as a staff, and my role as a leader of the Stars, is to set an environment where we're really good teammates. And look, our job is to serve the Utah Jazz organization. Like, that's what we need to support the Jazz management and Will and his staff. And so we need to be good teammates to them. And what that means is there's going to be a lot of change on the day-to-day basis. And so with change, we have a choice. We can complain about it, or we can embrace it and try to make the most of it. And I'm of the belief that as human beings, we always have the choice to try to control the things we can control. We can't control what Justin and Will want with our players. What we can control is trying to create an environment for the people that in that moment are under our leadership to create an atmosphere where they're improving, growing, and they're moving closer towards their best selves. And so I actually love that because it challenges that. I think that's one of the things from a mindset perspective that can help these guys, because there's going to be, and there already has been for the players, things out of their control. And so you have a choice. Like, are you gonna why am I down here, or so that was I got negatively affected by that experience. All right, that experience is over. Like, what are we doing right now? Like, we got to be present, and we got to focus on the things we can control and try to dominate that today. And then when we get up tomorrow, we'll find out what our next task is. And so that's the type of attitude I'd like for our players and our staff to have.
Because the Jazz have so many draft picks, I'm sure that the Stars will be involved in developing them. They did it last year with Ochai Agbaji. He went and played with the Stars. And Scott Morrison's still around. It's not like he's out of the building. I'm sure he's going to be a great resource for you.
Yeah, Scott and his staff did a terrific job, and Scott in particular did a great job of really, especially, they had some struggles early in the season, and they were able to rally where they were playing their best basketball as a team. But within that journey, they were able to really help the Jazz. And Ochai, as you mentioned, is a prime example of that. Like, his time in the G League really set the stage for his best play at the end of the season for the Jazz. And that's a credit to Ochai, and that's a credit to Scott and his staff. And so it would be foolish of me and the people that eventually I'll surround myself with not to use him as a resource, because he's done it and done it well. And certainly Ochai played a big part in that, because like it's a two-way street. But we'll be relying heavily on Scott and me specifically to help us as I navigate and learn. I have a lot to learn, and that's exciting to me. It's not scary, and Scott will be a resource, hopefully, to speed up that learning process.
As we're about to wrap things up, what is the building that you're walking into? This is ZBBC, the practice facility, the culture that Justin Zanuck, Danny Ainge, the crew has created. What is it like being in here?
One of the things, because I've walked into a lot of practice facilities, a lot of gyms, a lot of basketball environments. When you walk in here, you get the people want to be here. They're happy to be here. And that's a huge credit, because, like I've had experience in other NBA, and it's like, ooh, it doesn't really feel like that. It's like, okay, we can punch out at noon. Great. See you later. The guys want to be here, and that's a credit to Danny, Justin, and Will. When I watched, I came down here and watched Will's team practice a number of times last year, not as much as I would have liked, because I actually had another job, and I was traveling for that. But what I saw when I watched Will's teams play, I saw a team that competed every night. They competed to win every night. They had great joy in doing that, and they were connected. They competed, they were connected, and they had joy doing both, which is a great start. And we hope to try to create a similar environment with the Stars. We want our teams to compete every night. We want them to be connected, even if they're on their own individual journeys. We're connected, staff, players, staff, player to player, and we want them to want to be there, because the best way you make the most of your opportunity is you can be present in the situation, and joy is a big part of that.
Fun is underrated, is what he would say in his press conferences all the time. It's so true. It's almost a Ted Lassoan thing to say that fun is underrated, but fun in an 82-game season, in a 40-game season, doesn't matter. Those are long. Fun is underrated, and it's a credit to him.
It really is, and we hope to mirror that at our level.
Let's have some fun in the Salt Lake City Stars in the G League season coming up.
Thanks very much.
Steve Wojciechowski, the head coach of the Salt Lake City Stars, on Roundball Roundup.